My crops are my world, and I'll do anything to protect them from destructive pests. Over the recent years, I have been working to develop special that concern the genetic modification of both my plants and the pests that will attack them. Hopefully, nobody or nothing will come ruin my crops and all of my hard work. These pesky pests have been damaging our crops for long enough. It's been 30 years. I've been thinking, I'm going to go in and modify their genomes or modify my own plants' genomes, beat them at their game. They won't get to our crops anymore. Entire livelihoods have been wiped out by these dang bugs. Every season, just as we solve the issue with the bug, another appears. We have to do something that lasts. What do I start with first? Those annoying little medflies, the moths that won't stop flying into me, or the bacteria I can't see? They all keep us in the ecosystem. They're constantly coming back to our fields, but I bet I can isolate those in my field. And we've been studying them all pretty well. I bet I can get a hold of their genomes through a genome bank, and I can definitely modify them easily with my special powers of genetic modification. Yeah, this is going to be a piece of cake. No problem. Watch out, bugs. I'm coming.
What in tarnation?
I represent all the flies and I am present all over the world. I am well studied in the scientific community because I am a pest and I love it. This is why I'm a pest. I reproduce quickly, I am hard to exterminate, and I affect the human production such as farms, which makes me the ultimate pest.
What the hell are you doing in the middle of my field? Get out of here.
No way, this is only the beginning of the massacre. Now watch me devour all of your precious crops and plants.
Not if any of my genetic modification superpowers have anything to say about that. Watch out, pest man. I'm going to unleash my newly developed sterile insect technique on you.
This technique allows me to insert a sterility gene into your genome and delete your existing genetic information that allows you to produce offspring. Your days of producing and ruining my crops are over. Ha ha, try to create offspring now, pest man.
But I look the same. Did you even do anything to me? I have no physical changes at all.
That's what he thinks. Little does he know that he can no longer make any more baby flies. I use my sterilizing gun and use the application of Calvin Bridges' genic balance theory causes a variation of chromosome aberrations, including insertions and deletions of genetic material that will render all males sterile.
So let's talk about what we just saw. The sterile insect technique, or SIT, is used to make male flies sterile so they can no longer produce offspring. A sterility gene, which you can see on the diagram, is put into fly DNA. So the male flies that are then made sterile are released into the population to mate with wild-type female flies. But then, as you can see here, if the males become sterile, their offspring die off in the larval phase. But if there's regular healthy males, then they produce healthy offspring. So after multiple generations, if enough sterile flies are put into the population, there can no longer be any healthy larvae that can be made into regular flies.
Hey, you farmer man.
What? I thought I sterilized you. What are you doing back here?
That's what you thought. Little did you know that we pests are not as indestructible as you think. You thought that you sterilized me. You forget that we have a large population and I have a fertile sister. What are you going to do now?
You think I'm out on genetic modification techniques? Ha! I have another technology that I like to call a temperature-sensitive lethal mutation. A temperature-sensitive lethal mutation is a genetic mutation that, in flies, causes larvae to die off once they are exposed to a certain temperature. The exposure of larvae to temperatures equal or exceeding 33 degrees Celsius will kill them.
Take that, pestman sister.
What in tarnation, farmer? You haven't changed me at all. I look the same.
Little do you know, and now whenever you try to reproduce, I genetically modify you that your larvae will die at 33 degrees Celsius.
No! So the event that we just witnessed was the use of the temperature-sensitive lethal mutation. So just like the sterile insect technique, the farmer injected a gene into the fly's genome that causes the larva, which you can see in this life cycle process. Once they reach this stage and they're exposed to a temperature of 33 degrees Celsius or above, they'll die off, so they won't be able to form pupa or adult flies, which is just another way of genetically engineering the flies to not be able to survive the farmer's resistance. So in the population that we have observed, we have seen what is called a bottleneck technique. So the bottleneck effect is what happens when there's a catastrophe, either human-caused or natural, that dramatically affects and reduces the population. So in this case, the population of flies was drastically reduced by the farmers' sterile insect technique, temperature-sensitive lethal mutation, or use of pesticides or other things like that. This doesn't completely eliminate the population, but it makes it a lot smaller and selects for certain genes, which we can see here in this diagram. So what happens is after the catastrophe occurs, the new population may be resistant to certain techniques that the farmer tried to use, and the population will grow back with much stronger resistance to the genetic engineering techniques.
Oh man, if I can't get rid of these buggers, I'll make my crop super resistant to them.
Take my BT beam. It will genetically modify your genes to be more resistant to pests.
Okay, whatever you say.
So let's talk about what just happened. The Bt corn is a genetically modified organism, or GMO, where the Bt gene comes from a donor organism. It codes for the Bt delta endotoxin, which is effective at controlling caterpillars which would eat the crops such as corn. These endotoxins are very selective and do not harm other insects such as flies, bees, and humans. So let's talk about how the gene is actually inserted. You start with a plasmid and you cleave at the restriction site with a restriction cleavage enzyme, and then you insert the recombinant gene into the plasmid at the same site, so you have a recombinant plasmid. The plasmid is inserted into bacterium to multiply the genes, and the bacterium is used to insert the tDNA into the plant cell. The plant cells are grown on cultures in a laboratory, and you take the cultures that are grown on a petri dish, and you can use them to grow real plants that are manufactured with the mutated genes.
What did you do to me, you crazy farmer?
Since I failed to get rid of the pests, I decided to change your genes and make you resistant to them in case Pestman comes back.
Interesting.
Get lost, you crazy fool. You should have just planted a variety of crops on your land as a natural way to control pests. The diversity will prevent an abundance of any specific pest on a specific crop.
Yeah, look what you've done to me. This isn't natural. You're crazy. Get out of here!
Aren't you glad that I modified your genes to be resistant to the Pestman?
What are you talking about? Pestman's here and he's still eating me. Turns out he's resistant to your BT resistance gene, which is super not cool.
I don't know what you did to this, but it has a nice kick to it.
Get out of here, Pestman.
Oh, you stupid farmer. The pests are always going to be here. They're a part of our world. Instead of trying to change your crops into something we're not, why don't you just change your farming methods? Come on, Tobacco, show them what I'm talking about.
What you're doing is an aberration of nature. It's not just evolution, it's an accumulation of mutations. Whatever you do, we're always going to adapt to live to it.
Oh, you guys are right. I've been trying to use brute force this whole time to alter evolution of 100,000 years. I should just change my farming methods instead of changing the genetic code. Oh, I'll use intercropping to battle the pests.
So let's talk about the pest management system that Farmer Nate is using now. The strategy of mixed cropping, or intercropping, is to use biodiversity to fight against pests. This makes the crops more resilient by allowing the pests to focus on a less valuable crop, or it prevents a single pest that has evolved its entire life cycle around one crop to kind of attack a different crop. This type of farming, however, takes a lot more work to harvest and plant. Other forms of pest management include crop rotations, which is the process of farming a different crop at a different time on the same field. And you can also use pesticides and herbicides. In North Carolina, corn and tobacco are some major cash crops. Pests are able to become resistant to the pesticides because they're able to reproduce quickly, and they are able to have numerous offspring. These allow mutations to occur in the population more frequently, and they either have random additions, deletions, inversions, or insertions of certain genes into their genome. The frequent use of pesticides by farmers puts high pressure on the resistant selection in these pests. And here's a diagram of intercropping, where you alternate rows of crops using less valuable crops in between to protect your more valuable harvest.
Hello, I am Mr. Legality. I am here to take away the free reign you have when it comes to genetically modified crops. There needs to be rules for your powers and consequences for you.
You better be the last weird encounter today. I've already dealt with 2 others. Now, genetic modification has a lot more beneficial uses than you think.
Well, some of my buddies down at the FDA, APHIS, and EPA are going to lay down some regulation by not allowing for GMO crops. There's a lot of debate and doubt with human health and ecological concerns of genetic modification of plants or pests.
So let's dissect what Mr. Legality just talked about. There have been increasing international concerns concerning the use of genetically modified organisms for pest management, along with the United States needing more efficient agriculture for a growing population. There have not been any finalized rules set for what qualifies a plant as a transgenic plant, and the scientific validity behind this is still unknown and being debated among many scientists around the world. Arguments exist right now that the EPA is being too strict about transgenic organisms and that they need to back off to ensure that future smaller biotechnology companies can be successful. However, there's also the argument that the EPA is not being strict enough and there needs to be more regulations in place for genetically modified organisms. Another legality issue is the definition of pesticides and what qualifies an organism as being genetically modified. So it's just a couple of issues that the farmer will face in his battle for being able to genetically modify his organisms.
Oh, nuts. Now I have to deal with all this paperwork and regulations.
And I'm going to play the allergenicity card.
What the?
In the past, there has been evidence of allergies being developed from use of GMOs. There is a huge concern if the organisms are widely distributed.
So we just saw Mr. Legality pull the allergenicity card on Farmer-Nate. A phenocopy is an example of something that can cause allergenicity properties in a plant or an organism. One transgenic plant was shown to have allergenic properties during laboratory tests. This study was done by Nordley in 1996. To improve the nutritional quality of soybeans, a transgenic plant containing methionine-rich protein was taken from Brazil nuts and was developed by a company called Pioneer Hybrid International. The company discontinued the development of this product as a result of the allergenicity concerns, which could be very troublesome in the legal world.
But it's also important to note that modern biotechnology can be used to reduce allergy risks, as Matsuda did in 1998, by proving that you can reduce major allergen by mutating rDNA base pairs, and it's important to know that modern biotechnology can also be used to reduce allergenic risks.
So in talking about gene flow and negative side effects, we can reference a couple studies done in the past. A well-publicized recent laboratory study indicated that the monarch butterfly larvae were fed milkweed dusting with transgenic Bt pollen, and high mortality was exhibited in the butterflies. This study was conducted by Losley in 1999. The reason for death is from an extra mutation in the chromosomes of the larva. In other experiments, however, monarch caterpillars that consumed concentrations of Bt corn pollen naturally deposited on milkweed in the fields experienced 20% mortality with only 48 hours of exposure. That's by Hansen and Orbiaki in 1999.
There's also the ecological issues with leftover modified organisms and their effects on the environment.
There's more benefits of genetic modification than you think. You see, they can make plants more efficient for increased crop yield. You can get rid of harsh pests that harm humans and the crops. You can reduce costs by making planting more efficient and not having to use pesticides. And then it improves biotechnology companies and pushes forward science intellect.
Well, seems you got me there. I guess you win this time.
Yes, I do.